Well, hello and welcome everyone to our financial aid fundamentals workshop facilitated by the financial aid office. So today we have with us Elizabeth Mendoza, who is the
Assistant Director.
thank you, Assistant Director um, for financial aid.
Yes.
And then we have also with us Mafalda Chandler, who is the Associate Director for TW Scholarships. So I will go ahead and turn it over to them and let them do this lovely presentation that they have taken the time to put together for us today. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So we have a presentation that's going to go over basics of financial aid. However, we're also going to touch on what to expect as a graduate student, since we know that many of you have the aspiration to get a degree beyond a bachelor's and go to graduate school or graduate professional school. So we just want to touch base with what actually is financial aid and how we define that in our office. So for our purposes, it's not just money that a student applies for from the federal and state governments, but from the institution, in this case, Texas Women's University. But also there are private resources to assist you as well. And that is something that this presentation will also touch upon. So, as you know, as an undergraduate who are financial aid applicants, or if you never applied but are interested in applying as an undergraduate student, what is available to you from the federal government are grants, which are need-based funds that you would not have to repay, loans. These would be loans from the federal government, such as direct subsidized loan, direct unsubsidized loans, and also federal work study, which is a stipend-based award that you would be paid through your regular hourly pay stub. And then other types of aid are sponsorships, which you would get from a third party outside of college, federal, or state, assistantships, tuition waivers, and exemptions.
Elizabeth, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but we're still seeing just the very first slide of financial aid. I don't know if we're supposed to be going through the slides. There we go.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Sorry about that. So, as a graduate student, federally speaking, direct loans, direct unsubsidized loan type is available to graduate students, but also sponsorships, assistantships, and tuition waivers or exemptions would also continue for a graduate student. If you have, say, foster care waiver or the adopted student waiver, and then anything military, such as the Hazelwood types of exemptions, those would continue for a period of time as a graduate student. If you are the spouse of a graduate student, you would also be able to continue that as a graduate student as well. Now, for tuition waivers and exemptions, that is not actually something you are awarded through our office. That is something that you would apply through the office of the registrar. And so you would want to do that before census date. So many of our graduate students, instead of taking a graduate assistantship, what they actually do is they apply for a full-time staff position or faculty position with the university. And then what they would do is they would apply for a tuition assistant program as an employee of the university. And that is also considered a tuition waiver. And just remember, if you are interested in applying for any such tuition waiver, that would go through the registrar. And you would need to do that before the census date for every term that you want to apply to. And how to apply, it's pretty simple. It's very similar as undergraduates and graduates. You would do your FAFSA if you are eligible to do that free application of federal student aid. It's available for citizens and eligible non-citizens. And then there is the TASFA, which is for our undergraduate students to be eligible for state educational grants. Now, as a graduate student, you could still do a TASFA, but the amount of grant aid that you are eligible for is quite a bit less than as an undergraduate. So you would need to be aware of those differences, that as you are getting ready to rise to being a graduate student, you need to know that you're going to have to look for other sources of funding, not just from the TASFA if you are a TASFA student as an undergraduate. Applications for both will typically be available October 1st of this year. And you do need to do them annually. We start the award year with summer. So we don't go by calendar year, and we don't start with fall. We start with summer. So this 26-27 award year, we are starting that with summer of 2026. So anybody who hasn't applied for this coming summer, fall, and spring of 2027, you would want to do that. You can begin doing that now, and you would want to do that as soon as possible, especially if you plan to attend the summer sessions. January 15th was our priority deadline, but it's only a priority deadline, so students can continue to keep applying throughout the year. Now, I already mentioned that TWU starts the year with summer. This is known as a summer header, just so you're aware of that type of terminology. And then again, we start with summer 2026, go through fall 2026, and we end it with spring 2027. And then there is a list as well. Mid-March, we do start sending award letters. And then in late March, students who register for summer, we will begin awarding those students at that time. And that is because students can't enroll for summer prior to that. And also, because summer is included in that academic year, anything that you may have been awarded for fall and spring, we need to go and reevaluate that so that we can move some of that aid back to summer. Because when we say your annual eligibility for aid, that expands from 9 months to 12 months if you're attending summer. It doesn't actually create an additional 3 months of additional aid eligibility when we are talking about state funds and direct loans. Now, your federal Pell Grant, for those of you who are eligible for a federal Pell Grant, that is an additional amount, and it is based on your enrollment status. So if you're going to be half-time for the summer, then you would be eligible for a prorated Pell Grant award of 50% of what a full-time student would be receiving. And so when we determine our financial aid awards, when we receive a student's FAFSA or a TASFA, what we do is we have what we call our cost of attendance, which we'll go over in the next couple of slides. And that is something that TWU creates. And again, it is an estimate of what an average student would experience cost-wise. And then there is a student aid index, abbreviated that as SAI. This is from your FAFSA or your TASFA. And that is the amount that has been calculated from those applications as to what a student and their family is expected to contribute to the student's own education. And when I say family, for students who are required to put parent information on those applications, that would include a portion of your parent or parents' earnings towards that SAI. If you are an independent student, that would just include your contribution. If you are an independent student who is married, that would include a portion of your spouse's earnings as well. The resulting figure is what we call financial aid. And this is what we would, this is the amount that a student would be eligible for in need-based aid. So need-based aid are programs that require this financial need, are grants, work study, subsidized loans, certain scholarships, and other forms of aid, such as private scholarships, for example. Those often can be need-based aid. There are private scholarships that will not look at a student's financial need from a TASFA or a FAFSA. However, when the scholarship comes to the university to be dispersed to you, even though it's from a private source, and they may not have counted your financial need when determining whether or not to award their students. On our end, we do include that as a form of need-based aid. The same thing with sponsorships and with those tuition waivers, just so you know that is something that does happen on our end. And this is in part because these are funds that you are not required to repay unless, of course, your eligibility changes in the middle of a year. Okay, so going on to our next slide, as promised, we're talking about our estimated cost of attendance. Now, this is the estimate for 2025, 2026. The estimate for 2026, 2027, that hasn't been formally published yet. So what we're going to review today would be the 2025, 2026 estimated cost of attendance for an undergraduate student attending full-time. So as you can see that we're not just including tuition and fees in our estimate, we are including housing and food. And in this case, we're utilizing the on-campus average. We do include the books and supplies, transportation, and personal expenses. This is, again, an estimate based on 9 months because on average, most of our undergraduate students, they do attend 9 months. It is actually atypical to attend 12 months as a student. And we base it on 30 total hours for fall and spring, and also as a resident student. And so while the university may not charge you for books, transportation, and personal expenses, we are allowed to include that in the estimated cost when we're determining a total aid package, because it's just simply not realistic to assume that you will not have these costs, especially with those transportations and most definitely with books and supplies. Now, if you are a non-resident student, you would, want to add that additional amount that we have listed here on the slide to the resident estimated cost of attendance. So now understanding the estimated cost. So we're going to assume in this example that our direct costs are the ones that we have estimated as on the previous slide. So, and this isn't a breakdown per semester. This is actually a breakdown for 9 months. So even though you as a student actually only pay one semester at a time, in our example, we are doing this for just the full 9 months. So with tuition and fees, books, housing, and food, which includes those miscellaneous costs like transportation and miscellaneous. What we're looking at here is $24,045 for the full 9 months. Now, an award package example with a student aid index of negative 1,500, which we count as zero. That means that as this student would be eligible for the most grant aid that we have available for this student who has applied early, because we do want you to apply early because grants are limited in scope. We have scholarship example, 3,000, grants example, 13,195. And this example, this grant, it would actually be the Pell Grant, a subsidized loan of $3,500, an unsubsidized loan of $2,000, with a total amount of $21,695. So as you see, we're already in a deficit here. The total estimate is actually greater than what you were awarded. Now, if you only accept the scholarships and grants, you would theoretically, in this example, have to pay out of your own pocket or apply for, or you would know that you would have to apply for something additional because the gap here or the difference is $7,850. If you accepted scholarships, grants, and the subsidized loan, which is a need-based loan, even though you have to repay it, we still count that as a need-based loan, then the gap here is $4,350. And then if you accepted everything that we had offered to you, then the gap is $2,350. So you see how it goes down. And this may be doable if you are a student that will do a payment plan, for example. You don't have any other private scholarship options, or there are no options for you for a sponsorship from a third party, then this would be something that you could, very well be able to pay on a 4-month or a 3-month payment plan. You would just make monthly payments through November of fall, for example, and then, get that balance paid to zero. If you know at this point, looking at your estimate, that we hope that you would do your own based on your own costs. If you know you have a gap, then, we want you at that point to start looking for those third-party sponsorships, for those private scholarships. That way, that would help you, pay what you owe on your bill. So this is the estimated cost for a graduate student. Now you will see here that the estimated cost for graduate students for tuition and fees, that is actually less than an undergraduate student. This is because when we estimate the cost for a graduate student, we are doing so at 5 credit hours, which is half time for a graduate student. Typically, graduate students do not take more than 5 or 6 credit hours a semester. So the total estimated cost here in our example is $21,279. And then the scholarship examples, the scholarship is less because, again, graduate students are typically, on average, eligible for less scholarship awards than undergraduate students. And it's the same as with grants. However, we have added a sponsorship in this example, and that is because as a university that has many science-based programs like OT, PT, and of course nursing, there are many third-party sponsorships that students are able to take advantage of from their employers. And then the next is the unsubsidized loan only, because graduate students are not eligible for subsidized loan at the federal level. But they are eligible for a bit more unsubsidized loan as a graduate student than they are as an undergraduate student. So in this example, our total offered aid is equaling the total cost of attendance. So if this graduate student were a real student and they accepted all the aid that we had to offer, not only would their bill end up being zero, but they would actually have a refund coming back to them so that they can then utilize that refund for books and supplies, and if they live off campus, for their housing and their food. Now, in this example, if you only accepted scholarships and grants, you would have a deficit of $18,799 when we're looking at the complete estimated cost of attendance. Given that scholarships and grants is only $2,500, and tuition and fees here is $7,884, you would have to know that for each semester, you would either need to go on a payment plan or you would need to utilize other types of aid that would be available to you, such as that unsubsidized loan. Or you would have to seek out at, before school started, those sponsorship or tuition and waiver opportunities that you could very well be able to take advantage of. Now, I also wanted to talk here about the Zero Tuition Guarantee Plan. This is available to undergraduates. We like to think that this may someday expand to graduate students as well. But for the time being, it is only eligible for undergraduate students who are Texas residents, submit a FAFSA or a TASFA, enroll full-time, have the financial need. We prioritize Pell Grant eligibility first, or students that have a Pell eligible student aid index. And just to back up what I mean when I say Pell eligible, but not having a Pell Grant, and we'll touch again on this probably multiple times throughout the presentation, is that a federal Pell Grant is not infinite as an undergraduate. You have roughly 6 years or 600% to receive a Pell Grant in any year that you're eligible for that Pell Grant. So if you are a student who typically attends 12 months, your Pell Grant for that year, if you attended full-time and were eligible for the full amount, would be 150%. And so then we add on to that up to 600%. So if you are, say, ending up being a fifth year undergraduate or a sixth year undergraduate, you may hit a point where you're no longer eligible for Pell Grant. But if you still have an SAI that is in that Pell Grant range, and you are enrolled full-time and a Texas resident and still an undergraduate, of course, we would still consider you for the Zero Tuition Guarantee Grant. Now, another thing to note is that it only pays direct costs of tuition and fees minus any other need-based aid, such as scholarships, grants, private scholarships, tuition waivers, and sponsorships. And we don't include the subsidized loan in this, however. Other financial aid options are federal work study. Federal work study is really nice because not only do you become very desirable as an employee of a university because the government is paying 75% of your hourly wage, that 75% doesn't need to be counted as income on the following year's FAFSA. So that would result in a lower income that is calculated into that student aid index. And you also have the benefit of working on campus as well. Also, as an undergraduate student, are federal Parent Plus loans, which is as a dependent student, a parent can opt to apply for to assist with perhaps those additional costs that the awarded and accepted aid didn't cover. And then, of course, we've already touched upon private scholarships, sponsorships, assistantships, tuition waivers, and exemptions. And we haven't talked much about assistantships, but assistantships are something that a graduate student could apply for with their department. And what an assistantship position does is they assist faculty with some teaching, running labs, and grading papers. And as an undergraduate, you may have had classes taught by graduate assistants, or have your labs run by a graduate assistant. And then we also have private education loans. We typically don't recommend these loans, but it certainly is an option for those students who perhaps have borrowed their allowed limit of federal student loans from the government, or maybe in a given semester, you're just not eligible for those federal student loans in that given semester, then a private education loan could be an option for you. However, it is credit-based, so meaning a credit check would need to be run. As an undergraduate, you would need to have a cosigner, and these will be in the student's name as opposed to a federal Parent Plus loan, which is in the parent's name. So moving on here, when we're talking about aid, and when a student fills out that FAFSA or a TASFA, you will notice that it is asking for tax information from 2 years ago. And we are aware that 2 years is a very long time when you're considering finances available for the current year. And so the government and the state also has processes by which we can reevaluate that financial assistance coming from income earned from work. So there is what we call special circumstances, which would include changes to the income, such as loss of a job, change of a job where the wages are much less. And this could be for the parent too, not just the student. And then, of course, any loss of benefits. So maybe a parent had Social Security income and now no longer has that Social Security income. Or maybe they had retirement income and now no longer has that retirement income. Things like that are changes in income. And then there are, of course, extraordinary expenses. If someone gets sick and they have all of a sudden exorbitant medical and dental expenses that is now taking up their available income to pay and is no longer available to use for education. And also elder care. Lots of times parents, boom, you have another dependent because of those elderly parent or parents. Secondary school tuition, when we include that as a special circumstance, what we're specifically talking about here is a school that a sibling is required to go to based on a disability because the public school district does not have the capability to adequately educate that student because of the disability. So this is all something under special circumstances that we can reevaluate. Now, one thing to note is that if your SAI is 0 or negative 0, down to negative 1,500, a special circumstance actually is not going to assist you because we can't lower the student aid index lower than negative 50, and lowering it less than 0 is actually not going to help students either. So when we get a special circumstance request to reevaluate the FAFSA and the student aid index is already 0, we will not ask you for additional documentation. We will simply send you a regret letter. Now, that does not mean that you won't be awarded additional funding later in the year as it becomes available, such as that 0 tuition grant. It just simply means that we can no longer do anything with the student aid index, which is what this particular special circumstances process is about. Now we also have what is called unusual circumstances, and this is when there are changes in a dependent circumstances. So anything that happens before the current award year begins that has changed with the student and the parent, such as changes in relationship, for example. Or there could be, changes in housing where as a student, you could end up homeless through, and we don't assign blame here. If we document that you are homeless, we will use this unusual circumstance and we will change your FAFSA so that you are an independent student, which will give you access to additional direct unsubsidized loan, and in many cases will create more eligibility for need-based grants, such as that federal Pell Grant. But please note that it's not simply just reporting yourself as homeless. We will ask for documentation as well. Now, there is a process by which you can submit your FAFSA with no parent data. If you check a box for a request for unsubsidized loan only. And when you do this, you make yourself eligible for unsubsidized loans only. So you will no longer be eligible for grant aid or any other need-based aid other than those from private sources when you select this option of the FAFSA. So you need to be very careful when you check that. And it really needs to be only if you are not fitting into these other unusual circumstances as described. So when you have questions about this, we want you to come and talk to us about your circumstances before you submit a FAFSA as unsubsidized loan only. So the next steps when your financial aid awards are received is we want you to review that on your TWU self-service once you are notified, and accept and or reject, because you can do both. You can accept your scholarships and reject your loans at the time on your self-service. You can do both. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. But we do want you to review those. We don't want you to leave anything pending, especially if it's a grant. But we also want you to be aware and read that award letter that we ask you to sign at the end of everything once you are done accepting and or rejecting everything that we offered. And you will not get the option to read the award letter and if you've left anything pending. By reading this award letter, it just notifies you that there are enrollment requirements for every award. Some award types need to be full-time. We also want you to be aware of renewal requirements. All this is on our website, so we encourage you to cross-reference with our website your award letter and the A types on that to your to our website, so that you know what the renewal requirements are, you know what the enrollment requirements are. And again, the award letter, we ask you to click a box to e-sign that you have read that award letter. And again, this is actually, technically, it's not the portal. It's on your self-service. So don't go to the portal trying to look for the accept reject page in the award letter. You actually have to do the extra step of logging in to your TWU self-service. And then you will, on the sidebar menu, find the financial aid tabs to go to. Now, if you are accepting a student loan, after you have e-signed that financial aid award letter, you will get a checklist pop up in your financial aid for a master promissory note and entrance counseling. And this is required at least once at TWU whenever you are accepting a loan, or and it is once every 10 years. And it is required. So you will need to go to an outside federal website that is linked to do the counseling and the master promissory note. And also, if your parent has been approved for that federal parent loan, they will also be utilizing that same website to do their promissory note and loan counseling. In that case, they would be logging on as themselves. They will not be logging on with your FSA credentials. They would be logging in with their own. Now, because parents are more experienced with loan borrowing, what they will not do in most circumstances is they will not log on as you and do that promissory note and entrance counseling for you. So if they did your FAFSA and you were just not present for that, that is, if you just logged in and then left it to them to do the rest, that's fine. But just note that once you accept a federal student loan, both the government, the school, and your parent will expect you to log back on studentaid.gov with your own student credentials and do that promissory note and entrance counseling. Because it's required that you do that on your own, and your parents or parent does know this, and they will also expect you to do that on your own. Now, if you've accepted work study, we want you to start researching campus opportunities for those jobs with career connections or your department. And if you think you might be eligible for a tuition waiver or exemption, we do want you to visit the registrar's webpage. Now, steps to take before classes begin. Try to attend an orientation. So there are graduate student orientations. So I know most of you are already current students, but as you're rising to the graduate level, this is something that you may want to take advantage of again. Also, you may want to seek out a faculty advisor in your department. You want to create budget and compare awards to costs, because costs change every year. So even though you are a continuing student, you want to do that year to year, especially if you're going from freshman to sophomore. You just want to keep in the habit of doing that. That way there are no surprises, and you're not trying to do a payment plan the day that payment is due. Because when that happens, every other student is doing the same thing at the same time, and the system gets bogged down and really, really slow. So that would be something that you would do if your accepted financial aid is not enough to cover the bill. You would want to know that in advance so that over the summer you are enrolling in that payment plan, because you do not want to wait to the payment deadline. And you also don't want to wait until August to contact our office if you have questions. So if you know you have questions in May, you need to please come in May and ask those questions. Don't wait until August to do that. Now, financial aid for fall will disperse closer to the start of classes, and the same is true for any semester, whether it be summer, fall, or spring. It disperses like within the first week of class. But if you are expecting that financial aid refund, because good for you, you have planned, prepared, and calculated all your costs, and you are calculating that you expect to receive a refund, please know that the bursar actually will not receive refunds until after late registration is over. And if late registration is over on a Friday, that refund isn't going out until Monday. And please note that payment plan options are available if you are not going to have any other sources of income to pay the gap in what the aid was and what the bill was. So our important websites here, I'll just leave this here and let you take a picture of it with your phone. But the Student Aid Gov, that's for FAFSA as well. For TASFA students who submit a TASFA instead of a FAFSA, there's a new link for you, highered.texas.gov/students-families/TASFA/. Now, if you are rising to a graduate student interested in applying for graduate school, or maybe have already applied, you do want to contact admissions, specifically graduate admissions, to check on the process of your graduate application. There are many times where you are admitted to the college as a graduate student, but the specific department that you want your major to be in, they have not reviewed your application yet. Also, in many cases, that that department can't review your application because there's additional information that is missing. And it could simply be your final transcript, but it could also be something else. But you would need to track down what that may be that you need to submit. Residence life. If you are currently a freshman and you are rising to a sophomore, you have to renew your contract year to year, and that does include another housing deposit. So just so you know that. Now, most of our graduate students actually don't live on campus, but there are campus apartments that you could take advantage of as because if you do not want to live in the dorm anymore. We also have a student money management office that we've had for the last 4 years or so. They are wonderful. They will help you with that estimated cost of attendance and your award package. They can sit down with you and they can discuss money management strategies with you. The financial aid office is kind of limited when discussing money management strategies. There are certain things that as financial aid officers that we are just not allowed to touch, such as private education, loans beyond guiding you to the website, insurance, different things of that nature that are specific to the finance field, we are not allowed to talk about. But the Student Money Management Office can assist you with that. And then again, I have the link here for the TWU self-service, again, different than the portal. And then also the technology service desk. Whenever you can't log on, don't assume that you'll be able to maybe do that later. Oftentimes that is a case if internet is running slow, but sometimes something might have changed, especially if you're going from an undergraduate level to a graduate level. If you are continually encountering difficulty, you really do need to contact the service desk, especially if you are not getting important emails from the university. If you've noticed a stoppage on that, then that might be an indication that something's up with your email address, and you need to contact the service desk to figure out what is going on. And they are very helpful people. I love them so much. And they will definitely go to the mat to try and help you figure out what is wrong. And here is our office. We are now at Brackenridge on the second floor. And then which means our address has changed. So if there is something that you need to mail, such as a private scholarship, for example, or a form that needs to be mailed, please take note that we are no longer at 304 Administration Drive. It is 402 Administration Drive. And our phone number, fax, email, all of this has been the same since we were in the ACT building. Again, please utilize the online resources. There are financial aid counselors at every campus. So that's Dallas and that's Houston. So it's not just at Denton. We have financial aid counselors in Houston and Dallas as well. If you need to book a financial aid appointment, you may do so. Typically, we have our virtual appointments available for our Dallas and our Houston students because they're just not able to come in to Brackenridge. So if you are on the Denton campus, we would like to have you visit us at our front desk because we do have counselors at our front desk from 8 to 5, and we are open during breaks to assist you. But if you cannot stop by, then the Once Hub virtual appointments is an option for you. And now, without further ado, I introduce Mafalda Chandler, our Associate Director of Scholarships, and she is going to talk to you about scholarships.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Hey, how long have you been here at TWU?
I have been here since 2012.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So Elizabeth has a wealth of information, and it's fun to see these presentations because I've been here for 5 years and I have seen presentations several times And every time I learned something that I did not know before. And so I'm really grateful. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. So
You're
it's
welcome.
actually funny. Fun fact, just completely unrelated with scholarships. My name is actually now Mafalda Castaña because I have recently gotten married. And so I have
You're
taken
welcome.
on the the last name of my husband. So, and that's just as fresh as October 18th. So, I've just literally changed my name just now as Elizabeth was presenting, just to make sure I confuse everybody. So, we're going to change gears completely, okay? Because when we're talking about scholarships, although my Office of Scholarships does fall under financial aid, as Elizabeth mentioned in the beginning of her presentation, we do have completely different processes, and so different that we have our own office within financial aid, okay? So, for example, it is good to know the difference, or at least just a basic understanding between what falls under financial aid, what falls under scholarships, what falls under the bursars, for example. So grants and loans, like Elizabeth has mentioned, fall under the financial aid office. So if you're having trouble with any type of grant or any type of loan, the financial aid office is the office you want to direct yourself to. If you are having any issues or want information about scholarships, then you would go to the TWU scholarship office unless your scholarship is external to TWU. So anything private that you have received outside of TWU, if you have anything from another institution, then the office to go to is actually the bursar's office. All external checks, and they go straight to the bursar's office, and they should be sent directly to the bursar's office. And then they're the ones who check those checks. They do send it to our office so that we can track it, because it is considered part of financial aid. So any type of aid that you receive because you are a student and that you would not have received for any other reason, it counts toward your financial aid total. And so I just wanted to let you know just this basic, or important piece of information in case you need help with anything, just so you know who you need to direct your questions to. All right, so scholarships are different because they are not typically, and we do have a couple of exceptions, but they are not typically based on your financial need. So the FAFSA-TASFA process that Elizabeth explained are the ones that you need to use to determine your financial need. For scholarship purposes, the main focus is your academic merit, or sometimes things that are quantifiable in a different way, such as if you're a musician or you're pursuing music, your talent, or if you're visual arts, your portfolio, or if you're a dancer, etc. So that would be different than academic merit, and those are also awarded under scholarships potentially. But just to explain that the focus is different. So we are not primarily looking at your financial need. We do have exceptions, and we'll go through what we call our promise scholarships. Those do fall under financial need. But generally, the majority of scholarships are to reward the student for their academic merit. The other situation in which we may look at your financial need information is, for example, if let's say we only have one scholarship, and both applicants have the same, or both eligible applicants have, let's say, a 4.0. We have to make a decision who we're going to award that scholarship to. Sometimes we look at need. Okay, so that's when need becomes important, is when we have, obviously limited amounts of funds, and we have to make a decision who we're going to award. Sometimes we will award the student who has less funds as compared to the student that has more funds if we only have one. But aside from that, it is based on your academic merit. So we have different types of scholarships. We have what we call institutional scholarships. We have departmental scholarships, and we have general donor named or donor supported scholarships. Okay, so these are the three different types that we have. For institutional scholarships, we actually don't need an application. So if you're an undergraduate student, we will use the information you've provided through your Apply Texas. If you're a graduate student, we'll use the information provided in the TW graduate application. So the institutional scholarships, and I will list them and their award amounts in a little bit. They are at the discretion of our Strategic Enrollment Management Committee. They are a committee comprised of our vice presidents, and it's enrollment, student life, institutional research. There's a number of them that comprise this committee. And they created a grid called the Oakley Grid that compares admissions GPA and also school ranking and puts them all in a nice little grid, and it pops out what TW Merit Scholarship you would receive if you're an undergraduate. If you are a graduate student, the TW Graduate Scholarship is at the discretion of your college. And so it is the college that will let us know in the scholarship office who they will be awarding that scholarship to. For institutional scholarships, there is a minimum for entering freshmen. That's FTIC, is first time in college. That's what that means. You can go back, Elizabeth, to where I was. That slide is going to take a little while. Thank you. We do require a minimum GPA of 3.0 to be considered. If you transfer, we require a minimum of 3.4. And if you are a graduate student, we require a minimum of 3.2 to be considered. For minimum enrollment, for undergraduate students, we require at least 12 credit hours. We used to have part-time scholarships for transfer students. We still do for cohort. I don't think it's happening right now at this time. Usually it's nursing cohort that has either evenings and weekends, or just evenings, etc. So those are the part-time scholarships. And then if you are a graduate, we require a minimum of half-time enrollment, which is 5 credit hours. So those scholarships, you don't need an application, like I said, besides applying to TWU. Anyone who applies to TWU is automatically considered for the scholarship. It's important to note that eligibility does not guarantee selection. So the minimum GPA just gets you in the pool. It allows you to be considered. It doesn't earn you a scholarship. To earn a scholarship, we go through a competitive process in which typically the highest GPAs are the ones that scoop those funds. And so the higher your GPA, the better your chances of receiving a scholarship, and that is in general. For departmental scholarships, we do need something that we call the general scholarship application. So you will have to apply specifically for those. And just so you know, institutional scholarships and departmental scholarships and general donor supported scholarships may stack with each other. So go ahead and apply. The worst that can happen is you'll waste 20 minutes of your time submitting the application if you don't get a scholarship. Okay, but if you don't apply, you will not be considered for a departmental scholarship or a general donor named scholarship. The general scholarship application can be found at twu.academicworks.com. And there's another slide that shows it too, but twu.academicworks.com will take you there. Once you're in, you will sign in the upper right-hand side of the screen. Click on sign in with your institution, the following page, and then enter your portal credentials. So your single sign-on credentials, username and password, and you are going to be taken into the general scholarship application directly. You will see a number of questions Please answer them to the best of your ability. Don't rush. Take your time to give us good answers. We do have departmental committees, so each department has a committee that does scholarships. So those committees will review your application, and they will attribute a score based on a rubric that the department has created that is obviously the same for all students, and will take into consideration, like I said, primarily your academic merit, secondarily financial need, and other things that the department may be specifically looking for. Departmental scholarships require also a minimum of 3.0 GPA for all undergraduate students, and then 3.2 GPA for all graduate students. In this case, for undergraduate, they do require a minimum enrollment also of 12 credit hours, but for grad, the majority requires 9 credit hours, which is considered full-time attendance. The general donor name scholarships are very similar to the departmental. They also require the same general scholarship application. And by the way, the application opens every year, July 1st or around that date, close to that date. And it closes. So after it closes every year, March 1st. Let me retrace that or rephrase that. It doesn't actually close, but the opportunities that it matches you to do close on March 1st with just a couple of exceptions. So unless it's noted on the website, on the tw.academicworks.com, they will close March 1st unless it's noted otherwise. These are selected by the General Scholarship Committee, and that is a committee that is comprised of a member of each college and a member of the Advancement Office. That's the office that is in charge of fundraising here at TW for these wonderful scholarships. And then there is there's the person who's in charge of undergraduate advisement is also part of this committee. Okay, so they are the ones who offer the general donor supported scholarships or donor named scholarships. These are this kind of the same as departmental, with the exception that the donor does not require us to offer their funds to a specific department or major. That's the only difference. So our departmental scholarships are also funded by wonderful, generous people who want to assist our students in their education. Okay, they all require 3.0 for undergrads, 3.2 for grads, 12 credit hours for undergrads, 9 credit hours typically for grads. All right, we can move on to the next slide. Thank you, Elizabeth. Here's our institutional scholarships for entering students always. So unfortunately, if you don't receive a scholarship as you're about to start your degree, these cannot be awarded later. So you'll have to receive right when you're coming in. We only have one TW Chancellor student per year. This is our highest, most prestigious scholarship. It covers full tuition, fees, room, board, puts $1,500 in your pocket for books or other expenses that you may have. We also have the TW Oakley Scholarship, which now is $7,000. The outstanding varies between $500 and $6,500. The Excellence between $3,000 and $4,000. The Pioneer between $2,000 and $3,000. The new transfer student, and I should have added here the PTK as well, are each $2,000. They're not, so none of these are stackable with each other, except for the Boldly Go. The Boldly Go, let me see if I have another explanation here. No, I don't. The Boldly Go is an interesting scholarship. It was created to help students who live very far from the Denton campus to be able to attend TWU. So it does only exist as a stackable scholarship on top of one of these merits that you've seen, except for the transfer. So if you have a chancellor's, not a chancellor's, but because that's already everything covered, but an Oakley Outstanding Excellence or Pioneer, and you live more than 200 miles from campus, you may be eligible for a Boldly Go. It is in the two lowest levels, so $2,000 and $3,000. It also requires financial need or that you are a first generation student. So it's either or. If you live more than 400 miles from campus or 500 miles from campus, then you will receive the highest ones, which are $4,000 and $5,000. Those are just offered. They do not require any other they don't have any other requirements to be met, such as financial need or first gen. For graduate students, we have the TW Graduate Student Scholarship, as I mentioned. They usually, their amounts vary. And again, these are communicated to us from your college. There is a member, so this is the General Scholarship Committee. There's a member from each college that communicates to our office. They let us know a list of who to award, and we award the students they require or they request, and they tell us the amount to award as well. All right, let's move on. Okay, here's some other scholarships that we have. For undergraduates, we have the wonderful Terry Foundation Scholarship. This is a full ride and puts quite a bit of money in the student's pocket. It does require a specific application through the TW Academic Works. As you can see, the link is up there, tw.academicworks.com. We have the Chancellor's Endowed, which I mentioned before. And then we have all of these, they're considered Distinguished Scholars scholarships. They're the Legacy Leaders, the Honors Program, the President Leadership Council or PLC. Then we have a fun scholarship called Innovator. It's actually about to change names. I haven't seen what the new name will be yet, but it offers money to students who have aspirations to start a new business or have a business plan, and they would like to start an entrepreneurial project. Then it helps them a little bit get started with a little bit of funds. The Touchstone is the same as the Honors, but for transfer students. And then there's the Boldly Go. Departmental scholarships amounts vary, and then the general endowed scholarships or donor name scholarships, they also vary. So scholarships may be stacked with each other as long as we don't go over the cost of attendance. Okay, so we usually try to not let the cost of attendance go over. And again, the cost of attendance is kind of like the roof. We can't go any higher than that. Which means that if we try to go higher, sometimes to squeeze in a scholarship, they'll have to adjust other financial aid because the roof remains in the same place. So what happens is they may need to compress other aid that you have, which means they might need to reduce your loans or remove a grant altogether or something like that. So whatever happens, usually you cannot go over cost of attendance if you are receiving financial aid, especially. But in general, we try to not allow stackable awards to go over cost of attendance. All right, let's move on. I'll talk really quickly about competitive scholarship waivers. So the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board has a really nice provision for students who are non-residents of the state of Texas. If they receive any of our competitive scholarships, which are, like I said, about 90-something% of our scholarships are competitive, and their amount is $1,000 or more, they may pay Texas resident rates, which is a really great opportunity. So it cuts the tuition about half of the amount for out of state students. Okay, the next one is, so let's talk about the TW Promise scholarships really quickly. And so these are very similar to the zero tuition guarantee. Actually, I mean, they are the same with one additional perk, which is they have a college success component to them, which means that these students just have certain benefits, let's say, in terms of seeing advisors and having a summer bridge program and things like that in order to transition into college. And these partners are very involved in making sure that the students are successful and do graduate from a four-year college. So our partners are Dallas Promise, the T3, or Tarrant to and through, Red River Promise, Texoma Promise. And what we offer is last dollar tuition and fees scholarships for up to 8 consecutive semesters. So that's fall and spring only. It does not include summer. But if you are in 12 hours, you would get picked up by the zero tuition guarantee. And then as long as the requirements are met, or, for as long as you need to graduation not to exceed 8 consecutive semesters. All right, let's move on to the explanation of how these work. Oh, here's eligibility before the explanation. You do need to have submitted a pledge at your high school. Usually this happens at the high school during junior and senior years. The pledges, they're taken care of by these partners. You must be a Texas resident and then be admitted to TW before March 1st or by March 1st, complete your FAFSA by March 1st or TASFA as well. And then the family AGI must be less than $65,000 a year, and that's adjusted gross income. And or you have to be Pell eligible. And we use whichever benefits the student. So we're not trying to not give you the scholarship, we're actually trying to give it to you. The TWGPA, for admission, we no longer look at this 2.0 minimum. We do look at the 2.0 minimum for renewal. So that's a requirement for the scholarship to be renewed. Usually we always tell students be careful with dual credit. If you get a low score and you dual credit, or a low GPA and you dual credit, that will impact your scholarship and your financial aid eligibility, I should say. And then it does require you to enroll. We changed this recently. We're not no longer requiring 15 credit hours, although we recommend 15 credit hours if you want to graduate in the typical 4 years. 12 credit hours is what we do enforce. Unfortunately, these last dollar scholarships are currently only being offered for undergraduate students. All right, now let's move on to explaining how these work and how the zero tuition guarantee works as well. So as you can see, there is a breakdown, and my cost of attendance is a little bit behind Elizabeth's. She has the most recent one. Mine is still from 24, 25. But this is mainly just to show you that there's more to attending university than just tuition and fees. And sometimes people get a little bit lost with these terms. And people sometimes think that tuition and fees means everything. And it unfortunately doesn't. So you still have books and supplies and room and board and personal expenses, transportation, etc. That you'll need to think about how those are going to be funded. So here in this example, I have 2 examples. One where the student has a $2,000 Pell Grant, a $1,000 scholarship, or a total of $3,000 in aid. So I like to use a little actual physical example to explain this. If you're a visual person like I am, or a visual learner, this will help you understand. So I have 2 bottles here, and let's say that in this bottle, you have to put funds to pay for your tuition and fees. This bottle has funds for your housing, your meal plan, your other expenses, etc. So what goes into the bottle first? So your Pell Grant, your scholarships, etc., they go into the tuition and fees bottle first. So that's what we call gift aid. So this is free money that you don't have to pay back. Okay, so loans are on the side. We don't use the loans yet to fill this bottle. So whatever is left, so once your Pell is in, then it'll fill the bottle, say up to here. Then when you put a Texas grant in, perhaps it'll fill it up to here. And then we'll put a scholarship in. And once you put the scholarship in, it can fill it up to here, or it can actually fill it to the top, or it can even overflow. Okay. If it overflows, it goes into this bottle, the other expenses bottle. So your housing may be covered partially by a stacking of all these funds. If it does not overflow or tap up, like what is going to happen is there will be a gap, and it's this gap that will be your promise or your zero tuition guarantee. Now, if there's no gap, we can't put anything in there, right? So that's what this slide is trying to explain. Is basically if there is room or no room. In the first example, there is room, so that student would receive $6,960 in the last dollar scholarship. In the second example, the amount that the student receives in free aid or gift aid exceeds the cost of tuition and fees, and therefore there's no room for a last dollar scholarship or zero tuition guarantee. So I hope that was helpful as an explanation, and we will move on. Once you receive a scholarship, you will receive an official offer. So you will receive an email first. And this is looking strange in this slide, but it looks completely different on mine. But you will receive an email first, and then that email will direct you to tw.academicworks.com. And when you click on it and you sign in, etc., under the tab that says My Applications, you will find your scholarship offer. It's very important that you read it thoroughly because it'll explain the requirements of your scholarship. So if you have a minimum GPA that you need to maintain, if you have a minimum enrollment that you need to maintain, and it will also explain if your scholarship is renewable and for how long. So that's very important that you understand. When you are enrolling, it's very important that you keep those requirements, okay? So you don't jeopardize your scholarship. We try our very best to keep you out of trouble. So before school starts, every semester we audit enrollment of students who have a scholarship, and we contact those students who are not enrolled in the minimum required and offer them a possibility to request an exception to full-time enrollment. And usually we grant those if you have a very good reason for not enrolling in 12 hours or 9 hours as required. And those reasons could be that you're a graduate assistant, so you're working for us. It could be that you're about to graduate, so you no longer need full-time to graduate. You only need a few credit hours. Could be that you're a student teacher, so you can only enroll in 6 credit hours. You could be waiting to be admitted into a program such as nursing, and you can only take 4 hours, for example. So we are not going to force you to take 12 credit hours if your program is preventing you from enrolling in 12 credit hours. So we will email you, we will give you an appeal form. You will have to submit that because we need that documented. It takes 1 minute. It's a drop-down menu type thing, very easy to submit. And then we will process an exception for you. And so when you're enrolling, it's important that you take into consideration the requirements of your scholarship. And that's actually our next slide, which is going to show just examples of exceptions to scholarship requirements. Right now, we're also allowing a process of probation for students whose GPA falls below the minimum required. So basically, we'll work with you to make sure that you are working toward increasing your GPA to the minimum required to prevent you from losing your scholarship. Only if there's repetitive, just GPA below the minimum, then you will at some point lose your scholarship. And then finally, here's our scholarships team. I'm the first one. I need to update my name over there as well. I'm the first one on that list, Mafalda Castanha. Now it rhymes with lasagna, and it's making me hungry, and I haven't even had lunch yet. So, Mafalda Castanha, I'm the Associate Director of Scholarships. Lisa Quinones is currently working from home, but she's a wonderful scholarship manager. Camille is also wonderful, a machine, a rock star. And we are located at Breckenridge Hall in the second floor. You'll see us right when you walk in. There's our email, which is up to date. Woohoo! And there's also our phone number if you want to call us with your questions. And I don't know if we have time for questions or question and answers.
I do have a question. We get sometimes when we meet with students, the idea of scholarship, sometimes they don't want to even look it up. They feel like it's out of reach. What type of advice would you give to students that, are interested in applying for scholarships, but may feel like there's no point because they don't feel like they're going to get it, or don't understand all the steps involved? What would you suggest would be some good tips and suggestions for those type of students?
Yeah, sometimes I will tell someone like, "Hey, if I gave you $100, would you sit down and fill out a form for me?" And they will say, "Yeah." And I was like, "Well, what if it were possible for you to receive $1,000? You know, what if it takes you, I say, 20 minutes, and perhaps you could receive $1,000? Would you do it?" Well, that's really what it takes. The worst that can happen is you won't be considered. you know that's really the worst that can happen is it. But I do highly, highly, highly recommend students to apply every year, even if they already have a scholarship. We do sometimes encounter situations in which the student has run out of financial aid opportunities or is below full time, and can no longer get a grant, for example. If this is a strong student, we could sometimes come to their rescue with a scholarship. But if you don't have an application, how can we justify to our donors, right? Like selecting a student over another. So we have to have a very strict criteria for selection. And so those applications are really what permit us to do that. Also, when we're talking about competitiveness of scholarship that allows for the waiver for non-residents, our process has to be competitive for a competitive waiver. And so that is really important. We cannot have a competitive process without applications. And therefore, it is paramount. It's like so important that the students apply. And again, that's my recommendation to them is the worst that can happen is you won't get it. But you for sure will not get it if you don't apply.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I also had a question about going back to the zero tuition guarantee. I had a student come in and tell me that she went to the financial aid office to ask about receiving additional grants, but as she already qualifies for the zero tuition guarantee, receiving more grants would make her ineligible for the zero tuition guarantee. Is that because of the going over that cost of attendance that was mentioned? Okay,
Going over tuition and fees.
going over tuition fees. Okay.
Yeah, it's something where if they're already awarded that zero tuition grant, um, we're not going to be able to award them any additional gift aid, because then we would have to reduce or cancel the zero tuition grant. Now, there are some cases where one form of gift aid just trumps the other because it is larger. For example, the Texas grant. Sometimes a student will be awarded a zero tuition grant, but then one of our other assistant directors looks at the student's academics and realizes that they actually qualify for a $2,500 Texas grant. And since that is not dependent on tuition and fees, um, then what they will do is they will replace the zero tuition grant with the Texas grant because it is more beneficial to the student, because it can renew year to year, if the student, meets those renewal requirements. It's typically a larger amount as well. So in that respects, we could replace it. But it's not something that we can really stack it with. So if, for example, we award a student a zero tuition grant, and then a week later that we get a private scholarship notification from the bursar that the student had a private scholarship come in that same semester for $2,000, then what we'll do is we'll say, oh, they got a zero tuition grant. Now we have to look to see if we have to reduce or cancel that zero tuition grant. So let's say that tuition grant was $2,100 because it was paying their remaining tuition, and that private scholarship is $2,000. Then what we would do is we would reduce that zero tuition grant to $100. Now, if that private scholarship happened to be $5,000, then we would cancel that zero tuition grant. And that allows that money to go back into our fund to possibly be awarded to another student who maybe hadn't applied as early but otherwise met the requirements for that zero tuition grant. But in no circumstance will we send a check for a private scholarship back to a private donor and say, oh, no, they don't qualify for it. We're not going to do that. We'll just reduce or we'll replace the zero tuition grant. But when it comes to other institutional funds, we can't stack it on top of that zero tuition grant, though it may be possible to replace it.
It's kind of like I like to see it. Okay, I gave you the example of the bottle, right? But it's almost like, imagine you're taking a bath and your water gets cold and you want to put hot water back in. But if you put too much water, it's going to overflow the bathtub. So we can't let that happen. So you have to drain it so you can fit in the hot water, right? It's the same exact thing. So it's it covers tuition and fees. That's your bathtub. Right. So if you put something else that's going to overflow it, we don't want to let that happen. So we're going to drain out whatever we can to allow for that to stay in. Does that make sense as a visual? So we're going to reduce the zero tuition guarantee in order to not allow that to overflow. Now, that's because zero tuition is our own institutional funds and we can reuse them to award to someone else. Now, if like what Elizabeth was saying, there are situations in which, Pell Grant, that's federal funds, state, Texas Grant, that's a state fund. And then let's say a scholarship, if they do overflow, now it can go into housing. So that's a different situation than zero tuition guarantee. The zero tuition was designed really to close any gaps in tuition and fees only. Once the gap is closed, it doesn't have a purpose anymore.
Okay. Well, thank you both very much. That helped to shine a lot of light on that. because I was also very confused when she told me that, but now that makes perfect sense. So thank you both very much.
Of course.
Well, then, yes. If nobody else has any questions or comments or anything else they'd like to share, I'll go ahead and I'll end the recording.